Okay, so expressions lesson, we are going to be practicing writing statements from mathematical expressions and writing mathematical expressions from worded statements. Very, very important in algebra, especially, and then going upwards, that you be able to write a mathematical expression and later on an equation from a word problem, basically, is that you are practicing how to pick out information so that when it comes time to solving word problems, you will be able to write it from the situation and set it up correctly. So, a couple of things we need to make sure that we are clear on, and that is the vocabulary of writing expressions and equations, because there are words that mean specific things. Okay, so, and you can add to this list. Hey, let me know if I've missed any. These are all just all the ones that I can come up with. So, okay, for addition, the words in situations, expressions, word problems, all that mean addition. Total, sum, more. I have seen that one used. She's got 3 more. Total, sum, more, plus, together, or all together. I've seen both of those written that way. I've seen, like I said, I've seen it as together and all together. So let me just put that in the front. Let's see, for addition. I think that's most of them that I've seen as far as in word problems. Again, if you figure out more, let me know. We'll add it to the list. All right, so for subtraction, we have difference. We have less or less than. So I should actually probably put that as well, because you could be written as more or more than, less or less than. Not really many that I can come up with for subtraction, like I said, in word problems or expressions. You get the basic ones, right, where it says subtracted by. You could also have like added to, and at that point, you're using the root word for it. So we're just trying to make sure we come up with the words that we don't normally think of. Okay, so multiplication. For that one, remember, big word on that one is product. Times or times by. You can also put that as multiplied by, but again, you're using the root word in there, so we should know what operation is being done. Let's see, for multiplication. Product times by. Again, if you come up with any more, just let me know. Okay, so for division, the basic word on that one is quotient. I don't like using the word over, but I know when we read something and we say 5/4, getting people to understand that fractions do mean division. Like I said, I don't like using the word over because it's not really correct as far as stating the stating the operation. But I have seen people using the word over, or they'll read something like that as over. And again, it basically means, that you are dividing. Let's see, quotient, fraction. I have seen people say in groups of, because that means you're dividing by whatever that specific number. Let's see. Times, no. I mean, obviously, like I said, we get the divided by or multiplied by. I don't think, like I said, you come up with any more, let me know. We'll expand the list. Okay, but these are words that are commonly found specifically in expressions and word problems. Okay, so the other part of it is that you need to understand sometimes there is a time where you have to use parentheses right, in an expression or in a, oh, I did miss one. Do need to add that to multiplying. Distributed, because that is very specifically a multiplication statement, is if you are distributing something. Okay, so that being said, when we need to write an expression, or if we write a mathematical expression rather, and we're trying to write a statement from it, you need to understand that if you see parentheses, right, there's some words that you have to use to show that those parentheses need to be in your statement, right? Okay, so think about your PEMDAS. If you have parentheses, right, in an expression, you're doing whatever is in the parentheses first, right? So if you have 3 divided by 6 minus 4, whatever it is, you know you have to do what's in the parentheses first, okay? So parentheses are used to, do basically an operation first ahead of something else. So there are times where you need to know in a statement that they're asking you to put parentheses around something to show that a specific operation has been done first. And we're going to get a couple of examples of these so you can see it. And if you're taking a mathematical expression and writing it into a statement, then you're going to be using the words then and next, or using a comma to show that you're having kind of like a pause. Because, in English, a comma means that you pause while you're reading, right? So it's sort of like to realize that there's whatever's coming afterwards is kind of separate. So we're going to do practicing both ways so that you can see what I'm talking about as far as when you're going to need parentheses. But it's good practice. We all need to make sure we're doing it. Okay, so we'll start off with some basic ones, and then we'll work our way up from there. Okay, so John's age is 5 less than Megan's. Okay, so obviously we need to pick a variable, right? And we need to understand what that variable stands for, right? And depending on what you make your variable stand for in an expression like this, you could end up with two different expressions. So let's say we pick M for Megan. And I want an expression that shows that John's age is 5 less than Megan's, then you would say, okay, so John equals Megan minus 5 because he's 5 less. If you pick J for John's age, well, that makes a totally different statement, right? Because Megan, if John's 5 years less than Megan, then Megan is 5 years older than John. So you would end up with an expression like that. So stating what your variable means, and we're going to do this a lot more as we start solving equations, you have to state what your variable stands for because it makes a very big difference on how your expression turns out, right? That's two totally different operations, one's subtraction, one's addition. If we go by the original statement in the words, this one is actually more correct. The other one is not wrong, but this one is more correct because it does say 5 less, and that means we should be subtracting. Okay, but again, it really depends on what you make your variable stand for. Okay, so the next one, very, very easy because we're not given two different things to look at, right? We don't have two different possibilities for variables. All right, so we're looking at difference. That means subtract. Pick your favorite variable for a number. You can use X, and do me a favor, don't use O and don't use X. Or not X, sorry. Don't use O and don't use I because it tends to get lost in everything else as far as looking like numbers. So don't use O and don't use I. All right, so the difference of a number, I'm just going to call that N, and 12. So N minus 12. So you need to make sure you're doing this in the correct order. When it's phrased this way, then this is always going to be your first number, and this one is always going to be your second number. There are ways to write it the other way around. If I said 12 less than a number, okay, I'm still subtracting because I have less than, but this is the exact same expression. It's just written kind of backwards. And you need to think a little bit, make sure you're thinking about what you're reading. When I say 12 less than a number, that does not mean, right? Because it's the number that comes first in this case, 12 less than a number. If you have to do a check to make sure you're writing it in the right order, pick a number for, the variable. Pick an actual number. So 12 less than a number. Okay, so how about we say 12 less than, make the number 20. Okay, 12 less than 20. Is that going to be 12 minus 20 or 20 minus 12? So it helps, put an actual number in there so that you can get your order right. Okay, so it's not 12 minus n. This is actually n minus 12 as well. So make sure you're reading carefully. Okay, so the quotient of a number and 10, there's a comma, so we know we need a pause, decreased by 3. Okay, so like we said about the comma, that tells you that we need parentheses because something is being done first. What's being done first is before the comma, the quotient of a number and 10. Okay, so the quotient of, why am I putting Q for quotient? Okay, so the quotient of a number and 10 decreased by 3. So that is subtract, right? And the quotient means to divide. And again, the comma means that we need parentheses. You're showing that you're doing what's in the parentheses first. Okay, so read this one carefully because there's no comma in here, but you are going to have a pause and you are going to need parentheses. Okay, so product means we're multiplying. Multiplying. Okay, difference means we're subtracting. Okay, and here's our number, so that's going to be n. All right, so again, read it carefully because you're not multiplying first, right? The product of 5, if I had said the product of 5 and a number, then I know it's just 5 times whatever variable I want to use. But the problem is, this is the product of 5 and this whole thing, right? So this is my other piece of my multiplication statement. So this is going to be 5 times this whole piece right here, okay? And again, because it's an entire another statement, right? Like I could put the difference of a number in 10 by itself. Difference of a number in 10 is just n minus 10, okay? But that's the other part of my product, right? And again, the only way I can tell you as far as keeping track, and I know there's a lot of different ways that these can be written or read, is that if you're given a statement like the sum of, a number, and then it gives you this whole big long piece afterwards. In English, I think they would call that like an independent clause because it can stand by itself. That's something that has to be put into parentheses because you're technically doing that first. You're taking the difference of the number in 10, and then you're multiplying that by 5. Okay, so let's try a couple more, see how we're doing. Okay, so find the sum of a number and 5. Okay, so we have comma and a then. So we know for a fact we're going to have a parentheses. Okay, the sum is to add, and the product is to multiply. So I'm just picking out those nice keywords. Okay, so find the sum of a number and 5. Okay, so parentheses. Then find the product of that result. Okay, so they're referring back to the original and 9. So the sum of a number and 5, and then find the product of that and 9. Again, different ways to write it. You could also, if you were going to write this yourself, you could also say 9 times the sum of a number and 5. Okay, so you need to understand this 9 times the sum of a number and 5 is way different than 9 times a number plus 5. There's no parentheses, there's no pause, there's no anything in there. So if you see the statement 9 times a number plus 5, that's that. That's 9n plus 5, which is way different than 9 times the whole sum of something, because that's like a distributive property, right? So you need to be very, very careful on how you're writing it. Okay, if you see the parentheses like that, you need to understand, you need to find some way of you're doing this first, right? So this is the sum of a number and 5 multiplied by 9. Or find the sum of a number and 5, then multiply by 9. You know, something to that effect. You have to show that you are pausing and that you're using parentheses, and it's 2 totally different operations. Okay, so now we're going to write a statement. And again, there's lots of right statements for these, lots of different correct ways to write them. So you may write something completely different, and that's fine. You just might want to have me check it to make sure that it still works. Okay, so 2 times x plus 3. So x is just a number. We know that. It's just representing a number. I am multiplying, right? Because there's nothing in between them. And then I am adding. So this is similar to what we just saw on the last page with the 9. So you could write this as 2 times a number plus 3. You could also write this as the sum of 2 times a number and 3. And the reason we can do that is because and tells me that these are the 2 things that I am adding. Right? If you're doing the sum or the difference or the product or the quotient or whatever, and you see an and in there, well, what's being separated by the and is the 2 things that you are adding or subtracting or whatever you're doing. Okay, so second one. And again, I said before, I don't want to see the word over. Fractions mean divide. So I am dividing and I am subtracting. Okay, and this is just a number. Okay, so we need to figure out a way to show that I am subtracting 6 from this number and then dividing by 2. So you can use the word then with the comma. Again, lots of different ways. Now, what is not correct, I'm going to give you a no. This is not correct. A number minus 6 divided by 2. Okay, so that is not the same thing. A number minus 6 divided by 2 would look like this. It's not the same expression, right? Because everything has to be divided by 2. So that's not correct. So one that would be correct, you could say, okay, subtract 6 from a number. You get that all important comma and the word then divide by 2. You could also say the quotient of a number subtracted by 6 and 2. There we go. By 6 and 2. For that same reason, if you have the word and, remember that it separates your 2 pieces. Well, what are you actually dividing? A number subtracted by 6 and 2. So those are your 2 actual pieces that you're dividing. So a couple of different ways that you can write this. Okay, so last one. There we go. All right, so I am multiplying right? That's what it means when we have the parentheses with, nothing in between. We are subtracting, and there's my number, my variable that I'm replacing. Okay, so again, a few different ways that we can write this. You could say that the difference of 6 and a number, because again, you're putting it in the right order. So you could say the difference of 6 and a number. And then you could say 6 and a number multiplied by 5. You could say 5 times the difference of 6 and a number. I know my handwriting is getting a little bad, but there we go. So 5 times the difference of 6 and a number. I'm trying to think what else you could say for this one. I can't think of anything. I mean, obviously, if you wrote 5 times 6 minus a number, right? So 5 times 6 minus a number, that would be wrong because 5 times 6 minus a number is not the same thing. All right, so you need to be very, very careful on again, using the parentheses and making sure you've got your pauses and what you're getting done first. Okay, that's it. It's just practice, practice, practice on writing them, recognizing them, and again, so that we can go upward and start working on word problems and knowing how to write them correctly.